This is the Book Deal Podcast,
where you will discover the inspiring stories of the authors behind your favourite books.
No matter what stage of writing you are at, we've got you covered. I'm Tina Strong.
And I'm Madeline Cleary, and join us as we pull back the curtain of published authors.
One deal at a time.
The Book Deal Podcast acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and waters which it's recorded on, and pays respect to their elders past, present and emerging.
Hi, it's Tina Strong here, and in this episode of the Book Deal Podcast, I am interviewing Dani Vee. Many of you would know of Dani because not only is she an author of children's books, including picture books and junior fiction, but she's also a publisher at Strachan House. In this interview, we discuss Dani's most recent book, My Supercharged ADHD Brain, and why it's important for books to represent both sides of the ADHD experience. We share our tips for getting the most out of our own supercharged brains when writing, and Dani also shares her publishing advice for debut and aspiring authors. There's something for everyone in this episode, and I hope you enjoy. Dani Vee, welcome to the Book Deal Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, I have been so looking forward to chatting to you on the pod because I know you have so much advice to share and tips to share with our listeners, because not only are you a multi-published author, but you're also the podcast host of the incredibly popular Words and Nerds podcast and a publisher at Strachan House Publishers as well.
Yeah, I've actually become now the publisher at Strachan House. So I think it's just that ADHD brain having lots of fingers in all the pies.
I hear you with the ADHD brain, just trying to fit as much in as possible, right?
Yeah, and it's a hyper focus as well, like books and writing has been something that I've always loved. I was an English teacher before I was, writing and podcasting. And so that's just always something that I've loved. And, when your brain loves that, it just wants to do all the pieces of it. So
100%, and wants to put it ahead of everything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes. But firstly, and I've got lots of questions about that. But firstly, congratulations on your 2 new books that have come out recently, My Pet Croc and My Supercharged ADHD Brain. Can you tell us a little bit about them? Can we start with My Pet Croc?
Yeah, absolutely. My second JFIC, and it was an idea that when I was talking, about ideas of what to write next, my publisher's like, what would happen if a kid had a pet croc? And I'm like, I don't know, what would happen? I might try and find out. And unlike Riley, which was my first JFIC, which was just so impossible to write, probably because I was so new at it, this one I don't want to say it was easy because it's never easy, but it just sort of flowed. And the characters came to me and I was like, well, what would happen? And because I really like playing with the opposites, because I like trying to write into humor. So I was like, well, you expect the croc to be vicious and that to be dangerous. But what if the croc was as harmless and cute as a puppy? What would happen then? Because my kids used to just watch the dangerous animals documentaries over and over again. I was like, well, what if the most dangerous animals on earth all became as harmless as kittens and puppies? And then I thought, well, then what would that do to the ecosystem? Because even though that sounds great, that, brown snakes are no longer dangerous, there's a whole chain of events that happen. So I started doing some research, and then I thought of my character Felix, and he's been dumped with this crocodile from his aunt, who's this eccentric scientist, and his best friend Autumn Black. And then I had a little bit of fun with the villains. So I used to be an English teacher, and I remember having a classroom full of these beautiful Caitlins, and they were all spelt differently, and I was trying to remember who was who, and it was one of those things that
I wondered where that came from.
I was really stressing about how to remember who these exact people were and their work, etc. And then I thought, well, what would happen if the villains, and don't get me wrong, these girls in the class were beautiful, but I thought, well, what happened if we had villains, all had the same name, Caitlin, but spelt differently, and they just got worse and worse as the spelling became more complicated. And I just had a lot of fun with that, that sort of premise of having villains, because I think in kids' books, in particularly humorous books, you want villains that are also fun. Like, you don't want villains that you're too scared of. You want villains that are a little bit silly and a little bit like caricatures, and so kids can laugh at them rather than be afraid of them.
I have read something a little while ago, because my youngest, he always associated with the villain in all the books and movies and things. He always wanted to be the villain. And I remember, as a mum, you haven't done this before, and it's like, is there something wrong with my kid that just wants to always? But But when you look into it and you read into it, apparently it's because they're just more exciting.
Well, they're often more interesting. Either they're funny or they've got a backstory or
Mm-hmm.
they're the protagonist of their own story. So yeah, I've always been intrigued by villains as well, all those people who are really ambiguous, because I think that's generally what humans are.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much as, the villains that we see.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're all a bit of everything.
Yeah, and they have power, and that's
Hmm.
for a kid, that's pretty cool to associate with that. Um, so that's a hilarious concept, and I'm sure kids are going to love it. And what was the age group for that one? So junior fiction.
Fiction probably up to 12 years old.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, so probably year 4 to year 6, but then I went to a school and all the year 2s were buying it as well. So whether they were reading or getting their parents reading it. So it covers quite a lot of primary school because the premise is fun,
I'm sure the parents love reading it to the
Yeah.
kids as well. That's an important thing
Mm.
when you're writing a book. It's got to be, if the parents are possibly going to read it, make sure it's fun for them too.
Right.
Now, my supercharged ADHD brain as well. That's just come out very recently also. Um, can you tell us a little bit about that? What's the age group for that one, and tell us a bit about the book?
That's a picture book, so you're 3 to sort of 8 years old. But I actually think, and I used to teach picture books even to year 12 kids for visual literacy, and I think this book, it kind of goes across ages because it's about our brains. And I think anyone who knows anyone who has ADHD, whether it's your children or your children's friends or some relative or whatever, which and I think we all do because, diagnoses are going up, it's really just interesting to be able to put yourself in the shoes of a person with ADHD. Now, I was diagnosed pretty late, so only a couple of years ago. And then I started doing a lot of research and knowing that it's quite hereditary. So then I started looking at my daughter, I started looking at my dad, my cousin's diagnosed. I'm like, oh, this all makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as a kid and as an adult, I've just always felt a little bit left of center of some of my friends. I've just felt like the odd one out, and I was never sure what that meant. And then as I got older, teachers or whoever would sort of throw things at you, whether they were criticisms or comments like, oh, you're too loud, you're too much, you're too distracted, you're too this, you're too that. And, I've got a pretty good self-confidence, but it still chews away at that, and you think, oh, am I annoying? Am I too much? Am I too talkative? Am I? And then when I was diagnosed with ADHD, my cousin said, you might feel a bit of grief because you found out so late. But I actually felt relief, not grief. I was like, oh, like, thank goodness I've now got something to make me understand my brain. I don't have to feel bad about it. I don't have to take on all those things as insults. That's just how my brain is wired. And I thought, how amazing would it be for a kid to have a book like that, who was like me, and go, oh, I'm not, there's nothing wrong with me. It's just my brain, and that's the way I'm wired. And so we all know the hard bits of ADHD. We hear that a lot on the mainstream media. And so I pitched, well, what if we celebrated the ADHD brain? We know that it's hard. Like I get the, deep anxiety and the overstimulation of ADHD, but it also allows me, as we mentioned earlier, to do a lot, to hyper focus on the things that I love. It, makes me adventurous and a little bit risk taking. And I don't think you can write books or have businesses or do cool things if you don't sometimes take risks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, I didn't push the challenges aside. They're still in there, but they're a lot smaller than the celebrations, because why not celebrate a brain that's a bit different? So it's a really special book because it's, I wish I had it as a kid, and it's directly from the experiences, my brain.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're the perfect person to write it, clearly. And it's so it was important for you to write this book for kids because, like you said, you felt like you would have really appreciated that. And like you just said, lots of kids and more kids now are getting diagnosed with it. We know so much more about it. I think it's starting to become, it had a real stigma even for the kids, just knowing with my kids growing up, talking, like having classmates and stuff. And there was a stigma for quite a while, but now I think the kids are so used to kids. Like they have everything in the classrooms from all different, angles. And it's definitely not 100% okay. Like there's still a stigma, but they are just so.
But it's not just about the ADHD kid understanding their brain. It's about everyone else in the class understanding that, oh, we're all a bit different, and that's okay. That's okay that we're all a bit different. We can celebrate all of our differences. And, James, who owns Strachan House, is also diagnosed with ADHD quite late as well. It was about a similar time. And then I pitched this idea. I was like, yeah, celebrate it. That's a great idea. And he's right into making sure that we engage and celebrate kids. It's been the whole premise of Larrikin House. And then after I'd written like a zero draft, he's like, and what about this? And what about this? And we should do this. And what about this? And I feel this. And I'm like, oh, I think you actually should have your name on the front too. Like, you've given way too many ideas for this not to be your book and your experience as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Great collaboration. Can't hurt having from different sides. And also, the male-female differences with ADHD as well, isn't it? Like they think there's a lot of that. So that's really important.
We've been asked to, because we deliberately put a girl, even though it's every kid's experience, we deliberately had a female protagonist because traditionally women have been underdiagnosed in this area because it's been a naughty boy's disease. And I'm using the rabbit ears, people, because I don't believe in the naughty boy thing. It's just their brains. And so we are going to, because it's been really popular, this book, and I think we've sold more than we had anticipated, which is a good problem to have. We are working on one that's also sort of trying to dispel that myth of the naughty ADHD boy and trying to get a bit more understanding of that kid. So I've been doing a bit of research into that. I was a teacher for 17 years. And so just trying to unpack that and not dismissing them as naughty boys. They just need stimulation. What do they need, to help them function during the day?
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be great. And even because it'll be such a useful tool, this book. And then even just having, I imagine if it's about a boy with a boy on the front, like the boys are just going to pick that up more, aren't they? And so it's important for them as well. No, it's a really important book, Dani, and congratulations to you both. So now you put your supercharged brain to very good use with your podcast and your writing and your publishing, and you're a mum as well. There's a lot going on. And it does sound and I love how you're celebrating the positives of an ADHD brain as well in these books. And it's funny, I actually had a friend once say to me when she found out that I had ADHD, that she was like, oh gosh, I'm so relieved because you do so much. And to her, she was just like, I feel like you're so productive and you do all these things. And I just would be like, oh, well, how does she get that stuff done? And compare herself. She's like, oh, no, you've got ADHD. This is great. I can just I can stop comparing myself.
The number one question I have gotten asked every time I go anywhere, writers' conferences or wherever, is how do you do so much? And I don't like to think about it because it kind of makes me feel a bit stressed, like, oh, how do I do it? Oh, is that why I'm stressed? Oh, I don't know. And so finally I have the answer.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I mean, but it's absolutely different for everyone. And there is that flip side to it, like always feeling like you're on and that sort of thing. Which is important for people. And so there's negatives and positives, as everyone does, even non-ADHD brains.
But we've known about the negatives for so long because I feel like that's been the focus, which, it needs to be for people to understand. But, it also helps us do this, that, and that. So let's have a bit of a different conversation about ADHD as well.
Mm-hmm. No, it's great.
Hi, I'm Carla Salmon, author of We Saw What You Started, which will be published by Pam Macmillan on the 1st of July 2025. We Saw What You Started is a teen crime mystery perfect for 11 to 15-year-old readers. It follows new boy Otto, a Californian surfer who arrives in a small, Insta-worthy coastal town in Australia and joins a local surf lifesaving club, hoping to fit in and find some friends. Unfortunately, this is made much more challenging for Otto when he's blamed for a string of suspicious fires that damage local businesses. It's only local girl Millie, the club's surf lifesaving champion, who thinks maybe Otto is innocent, because Millie knows that small town rumours aren't always true. Together, they have to work out if they can trust each other and find out who is actually responsible for the crimes. I've written We Saw What You Started specifically for young teens, exploring themes that are relevant to their everyday lives, like what they're willing to do to keep their friendships, the competitive vibe that often exists in groups, meeting parent expectations or, more likely, pushing boundaries, juggling part-time jobs, and, of course, a first crush or two. The book also poses the question, is it ever okay to do the wrong thing for the right reasons? I really hope teens hear their own voices in Otto and Millie's dual points of view and enjoy a little mischief and fun during lots of fast-paced action as the characters ride dirt bikes on beach roads, sneak out for night swims, and try to avoid trouble at the skate park. The story is very much inspired by some of my favourite coastal towns and childhood memories, and I can't wait for you to read it. Thanks so much for your support.
I'm sure we've got lots of listeners with ADHD, or maybe they're listening to this and going, oh, maybe I have ADHD, because that's where I actually first ever thought that was from a writing podcast that I listened to about 10 years ago. And the host, she had just been diagnosed with ADHD, and some of the things that she was saying, I was like, oh gosh, that sounds like me, and just put that little thought in my mind. And that's, it probably took another 5 years for anything to come of it. And
more than 20 years, I was diagnosed with an anxiety and panic disorder, and anxiety meds made me about 50 times more anxious. And I was like, well, why don't they work on my brain? And no one thought to say, well, maybe you have ADHD. It was, again, something that I, researched and thought, oh, this sounds like me. My cousin and another friend said, do you think you have ADHD? So, I do think, and I've been talking about this a bit lately, if you follow me, but I think in a lot of ways, the medical profession have let women down in a lot of ways, whether it comes to menstruation or our reproductive organs or ADHD. It's a bit sort of like suck it up mentality. And I'm not saying that's all medical professions, obviously not. I've had some brilliant doctors, but I've also had, experiences where I've been dismissed or misdiagnosed. And I think, part of that was also advocating for ourselves. We know our bodies and our brains better than anyone. We wake up to them every day. So I think as women, until some things start to really change, I think we need to make sure we advocate very deeply for ourselves and for our daughters.
Yeah, that's important. That's a really good message. So for those writers, I'm sure there's probably lots of writers with ADHD somehow, especially if you're someone who's very prolific in getting words down. It could be you. Or on the flip side to it as well, there's the distraction that can come from it. So I thought we'd offer some tips today, Dani. I know some have some tips that I guess help me with it. Certainly once I had been diagnosed, like you said, it was a relief, and it almost made things better kind of straight away, because I was like, oh, I just know that I need to do this now, instead of just trying to be like, well, that person doesn't have to write 1,000 things on their list every day. I'm not that person. I'm somebody different. It helps me. And that's been incredibly helpful just in that knowledge. So do you have any tips, Dani, for writers who are trying to get the words down and trying to focus and with an ADHD brain?
I'm probably going to be very disappointing right now, because I get thoroughly distracted. And I put myself on a time lapse the other day when I had the day to write. And I thought, I'm just going to see what I actually do. And it was so funny, because I would write, I'd get up and make a tea, I'd write, I'd look at my phone, I'd write. I painted my nails. Like,
so important.
When I looked back at it, I went, wow, how do I get anything done? So what really works for me is little short, sharp bursts, because I'm like, okay, I've got 20 minutes to write, go. And I know those 20 minutes are precious. When I have a day, I just squander it, really. I was wondering why I was really good at writing on the plane and in airports. It's because I don't have anything else to do but the laptop in front of me. I don't have Wi-Fi, and I don't, have anything else that I can do. I can't just get up and get a snack. So I think where I write in a cafe is good for me as well, because you're there with purpose and you're there with a time constraint. Oh, please, for the love of God, give me a deadline. If you just tell me that I've got whenever to write it, you'll get it never. So deadlines really work for me. Competition works. When we did NaNoWriMo and we were competing sort of with each other but ourselves, but every week we'd sort of say how many words we'd each written each week. That was a real motivator, because I needed to get to the, the point that we all wanted to get to, and, you kind of wanted to beat your mate. So that really helped. So for me, I like to write in the cracks of time, because I think 20 minutes for me is a lot more productive than 2 hours, because like I said, I'll just waste it. And even if, like, I try and put self-imposed deadlines in, but they're not as significant as when someone says, you need to give me this by this time. I don't know if you're the same. I don't sleep a lot. I try and sleep, but my brain just won't. It doesn't matter what time I go to bed, my brain will wake up 6 hours later and go, we're awake. Here's 4,000 ideas for you today. So it doesn't matter if I go to bed at 10 or 12. And so I've just started going to bed, well, not started, I've done this for a long time, about 11 or 12, because I don't want to be waking up at 4.
Mhm.
So, you know, so
Fair enough.
thank you, brain. Even on the weekend, I try and make the room really, really dark and all of that.
Mhm.
And I managed to sleep in till 8:30 on Sunday morning, but I did go to bed at 1:30, and I was still very proud of myself. I'm like, 7 hours, look at me. So I don't know. I think when you have ADHD, sometimes you have more hours in the day because you don't sleep a lot, but then you've got less because you're just distracted.
Yep. Yes. Not as productive, maybe. Yeah. No. Your nails look great, by the way, so that was worth it.
Much.
Um, they were really good tips, and I think they'll be all hugely beneficial. But some people probably wish that they didn't sleep as much. Some people wish that they could only sleep, 6 hours. I used to always think that I wish I could just sleep less and kind of get more, kind of squeeze more into my day. But no, I totally agree, and I agree with you about the holiday thing. If we've got a caravan and we go away caravanning, and I get so much writing done on holidays just because I'll get up early before the kids and I'll sit outside. Like, we don't take, if normally at home I feel like, okay, maybe I've got to do some exercise and stuff like that. I can still do exercise on holidays, but no one really wants to do that. So I just feel like I just sit in my little cave and I just write until the kids get up. And normally I have all these other things that we need to do, even just like getting ready for school or going to work, but you're kind of trapped. So it's great. So I get lots done there. So I completely agree with you on that one. So, but my other tips at work, timer, like you said, is great. When I first started getting back into writing, a 1 hour timer. I would set a 1 hour timer when I had a little kid and I was, like a baby, putting them down for a nap. I'd be like, set your alarm for 1 hour, get it done. I just felt like I could tick the box, But setting alarms, 1,000 alarms, because I don't know about you, but I have a lot of things that pop up in my head all the time. Oh, got to do that. Oh, got to do that. Oh, got to do that. So sometimes I think just quickly just set an alarm in your phone, even if it's for later today, and it'll because I will always forget it, but if the alarm will remind me, and it gets it off my head.
Yes.
Gets
I
it
have alarms for everything in my life, and when you scroll my phone, it's just alarm, 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 because I love my children, but sometimes I get so hyper focused or distracted. If I didn't have that go pick them up from school alarm, I reckon I would have been late 50% of the time. I'm like, oh, gotta go. So it's really helpful.
No, 100%. And also it helps you focus though, don't you think? Because I have a 2 o'clock go to school and sit in the lineup on the days that I do pick up. And but then I go, if I don't have that alarm, I would constantly be like, oh, is it time now?
Yep.
Oh, is it time now? I keep looking at the clock. But and I think that's helpful for anyone, just to set it, and then you actually don't, it's amazing. That was like a game changer for me. I don't know how it took me so long to work that one out, but you just can sit back and write and not worry about it. Also I try to keep a routine. So like I try to get up at a, time in the morning and just get my writing done so I can kind of tick that box, because I get quite frustrated. And sometimes when you get in that rut of not writing, it's hard to get out, isn't it? Headphones as well. White noise, I have those loops, those ones that just block people out. So I was the same this morning, went to a cafe and just, popped them in so I couldn't hear, or those binaural, is it called binaural beats, that you can get, just on, Apple Music and Spotify and stuff like that. And that's just puts you into like a bit of a really hyper-focused state, which is nice. And you don't even know that they're there. But I find them really productive too.
I have the noise cancelling as well. Cannot listen to music with lyrics because my brain won't be able to cope with that.
Yep.
But yeah, I just chuck on the classical writing music on Apple, and I don't even notice it's there, but it helps me focus and I'm not distracted by the noises around me.
Yeah, no, it's great. Really good tips. So now before you go, drawing on your publisher brain now, do you have any advice because we have lots of aspiring authors that listen to the podcast? Do you have any top tips for aspiring authors who are trying to get a book deal?
Yeah, and I think it's a real balancing act. And these are what I'm going to say is probably going to contradict some things that we've all been told. Write what you love, etc., which is important, but it's just as important to know the market at the time. it's forever changing, even as publishers, and we have good intel. We look up books and stats and how they sell from Nielsen. We have Simon & Schuster telling us what's going in the marketplace, what Big W are buying, all that kind of stuff. But it still constantly changes. So you think you know something and something's selling and something's hot, and then it will be like, nope, not that anymore, this. And so I can imagine as a writer, it's even more difficult because you don't have access to all those data and conversations that we do. But I think you need to do your best to know who's publishing what, what's the brand of each publisher, what's selling well, what's not selling, what's hot. What are kids' reading habits right now? And what are the important issues? And, as we talk about ADHD or neurodivergence or diversity, these are all things that are really important in kids' books at the moment. So it's hard to know everything, but you really just need to keep your ears open, listen to podcasts, like ours. Go to writing conferences when you can. Go to book launches because they're free. You can just go to someone's book launch and support them. So just do what you can. Look at the best-selling list, go into bookshops, speak to booksellers, and I think just educate yourself as much as you can. I do manuscript assessments as well as part of the publishing, and we do pitch parties and all those kind of things. And, the submission piles that we've just had in June. We signed someone from that, by the way. That's very exciting. But I think it's about practice and now your craft. As authors, myself included, we're always in such a rush to get published because, oh my God, when's my next book deal? Oh my God, I need to get a book deal. And I understand more than anyone that urgency. But it's kind of like you wouldn't expect to be a brain surgeon just by watching a brain surgeon do brain surgery once, right? And so I think we sometimes underestimate what it takes to be a writer. And someone said it takes you 1,000,000 words to write any good words. And so I don't know the truth in that, but I actually think the more you write, the more you hone your craft. That's the key, because even if what's in, what's great, what's selling, if a publisher comes across a great story, they're going to want it. Whether it's now or in 2 years or whatever, they're going to want it. And I just think in such a competitive industry, and, the industry is doing it tough at the moment for whatever reason. It might be the financial crisis, I have no idea. But near enough isn't good enough. And I see in the submissions pile, we talk about rhyme a lot, particularly for picture books. And most of the rhyme I read is not ready for submission. And I think you need to perfect your craft. Be honest with yourself. If it's not quite right in rhyme, it's not going to be quite right for the publisher. So you have to be honest with yourself. And I know I love rhyme. I love it. I've taught poetry. I'm obsessed with it. But I know that it's a bit tricky in publishing. And so besides my Epic Dad, all my picture books since then have been in prose. Fingers crossed I'll get to write one in rhyme again one day. But you really have to listen to the market and really hone your craft. And try not to take rejection personally. We've all been rejected, like every single writer has. It's part of the business. And even as a publisher, sometimes I love a manuscript and James loves a manuscript, but for whatever reason we can't publish it because something similar's just come out, or something similar came out with the same sort of idea and it didn't sell well, or junior fiction isn't selling very well right now, or whatever the reason, And so I think as publishers, we look up stats like a religion. And so sometimes we have had to pass on stories that we really liked because we didn't think they were going to sell at that time. But the good news is that, and I think this is a real lesson in what I'm trying to say, is that someone that I just signed recently through the submissions pile, she said, I submitted to Larrikin House 4 years ago and didn't get published. And 4 years on, we loved her manuscript. And it was a really tight, well-edited, fantastic issue-based manuscript. And it was like she's listened to the market, she's listened to what we want as publishers, and she's really honed this craft within an inch of its life. Like obviously it's going to go into editing, but I would say it would not need a lot. Another author that I'm looking at signing, again, she's done a manuscript assessment with me a couple of years ago. The manuscript wasn't ready, but 2 years later I just read something of hers that's amazing and I want to look at publishing it. Another author that did all of our School of Larrikins, and obviously you don't have to do that, but it's just an example. She did all of our courses and then she pitched something to James. It wasn't quite right. Pitched. And then she pitched something and James was like, yes, I like that. You need to write it. And we're publishing that. It's coming out next year. So I think if you love writing, you'll keep doing it no matter what. And so I think it's just really important to just keep honing your craft, and everything you write is not wasted words. My sad publishing story is that I wrote a 90,000 word crime novel. The publisher called me to say that they loved it. They wanted me to rewrite it from first to third person. I rewrote it. It took me, months and months to rewrite it, and then I never heard from them again. So we've all got that story,
Mhm. Mhm.
And so you can say, yeah, it's disappointing, but I learned a lot from that process. Of course, I would have preferred a published book, but that's not the nature of this business. If you want certainty, you know, you go to uni and you come out as a teacher or a whatever, and that's certainty. And there's uncertainty in this business. That's why it is so rewarding when you finally get published. But I think you just have to hone your craft, because I see a lot of submissions or manuscript submissions where people are still learning, which is fantastic. We should be learning our craft. Or people who are kind of like, I did a workshop and now publish me. And sometimes that happens. And I love that when that happens. But sometimes you need to watch a few more brain surgeries.
It's a long game.
It is.
That's what we say. Like, it's a long game, and I think that's all really important information. I sort of equate it to, like, you're not going to sell a huge piece of artwork the first time you pick up a paintbrush. Like, you just aren't skilled, and you haven't painted that well, and it's but we don't expect someone to just pick up a paintbrush and sell their work and have a huge display at an art gallery. And it's very similar. You just got to keep going, and you never look at those artworks as wasted time. It's and it's fun and enjoyable for the person, and then just getting better every time. No, I totally agree.
Everyone accepts that it takes 4 or 5 years to do a university course, right? And then you're a qualified teacher. And then you're still a beginning teacher, and you're probably, if I'm honest, not good for another 5 years, from my...
And you probably didn't get the best job that you wanted either. You just take the first one that's there, and you're not the headmaster or the head of school or whatever it is. Yeah.
I think we just need to take a little bit of that into our writing, and there are exceptions to every rule, of course, but just take the time to learn and hone your craft. And I think, the authors that I was kind of mentioning before, I hope those stories help as well. And even myself, like, I was writing for years and years and studying literature and teaching English before I ever submitted anything, because I just never thought I was good enough. But then finally I'm like, okay, it's now or never, lady. You're not getting any younger. So, it's not like the first manuscript I ever wrote got published.
Yeah, no, rejections are just part of the deal, isn't it? It's part of the pathway forward. Just quickly before you go, what about any top tips for our debut authors? We've got lots of debut authors that listen. We've got some that are about to publish, some that have just published this year, some that are stuck in the second book blues, we'll call it, trying to work out what to do there. Any tips for them?
Yeah, I think you've got to hit the ground. I did this with my first book. I, spent my own money on sending as many bookshops as I can, a little signed bookmark saying, thank you for having my book. And then I went to as many bookshops as I could. And I just did like a whole weekend day trip. And I just did a little map of, one-way map of where I could go and visit bookshops and get to know booksellers. And then they've signed your book. They put a little sticker on it. They might hand sell it to someone. So, oh, the author was just in. This suits your, what you're looking for, etc., etc. Go to book launches, get to know other authors, then you'll have a really nice support base. We have a really beautiful group of, authors that we spend a lot of time with on a social matter. We don't always talk about writing, but it's just nice to have that really supportive people who are, because your family don't often want you to hear you talking about writing. They sometimes want to talk about something else. So it's nice to have that little support group. I would be looking into writing groups, whether it's an official one at your library or whether it's a couple of writing mates that you just catch up or you can throw ideas around with. Like, I have a lot of people I can go, what do you think about this idea? What do you think about this title? Or could you read this chapter? And I obviously would do the same for them. So I think just creating those little communities. And I'm just trying to think of free stuff, because I know you don't earn a lot of money as a debut author, or, sometimes an established author either.
Sometimes ever, yeah.
Sometimes ever. So I'm trying to think of things that are just, I'm not saying time's not important, because time is very important, but, having a book out's really important too. So you should probably put aside a month or two to really go out and get on the ground, I reckon. Go to book launches, go to as many, Sydney Writers Festival, the Family Day was amazing that just went, because you could go there, you could meet incredible authors, you could watch them on the stage, you could talk to other authors, you could have your book signed. So it was this real really great vibe of meeting people and learning and seeing what kids are buying. I think that's kind of the best information that you can have, and just support other authors, and it's not to get something back. It's just because it's such a great celebratory community that we do celebrate each other, because we know how bloody hard it is to get published. So when someone has a win, we're not sitting there jealous in our little witch caves. We're like, yay, someone's done it. Whoa. And we're celebrating their book, and we're getting them on our podcast, and we're putting them up in our stories, and we're reviewing their books, and we're holding up their book in the bookstore. Like, all of that stuff is free and helps you to be part of that community. So for me, community is just has to be number one.
No, absolutely agree. That's amazing advice. Thank you, Dani. It's been incredible having you on the show today.
Thank you. I've enjoyed talking about all of that important stuff.
It's very important, and especially to introduce your 2 new books into the world as well. Thanks, Dani.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Book Deal podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the pod so you can receive updates as soon as our new eps drop. And to keep up to date with what the pod is doing, you can also find us on Instagram.